AI, robots, driverless cars. In the development of future technology, there's one sometimes overlooked part of the equation: electricity.
AI 的发展其实就是100%的需要电力的发展。
没有电力，你就不能支持这些高新技术的发展。
Energy potentially becomes the bottleneck when it comes to how quickly you can ramp up that industry.
With the US and China racing for tech supremacy, the power must stay on, always.
The tolerance to power failure will go down to 0.
新的这个科技时代里面，我觉得电力可能比土地更重要。
Between China and the US, who's winning the electricity race? And what will it mean for their tech ambitions?
"如果我想去制作一部动画片的故事以及剧本，我脑海中又没有任何的想法，我会先用 DeepSeek 把我想要的东西，比如说，我希望写一部关于中国的魔法世界的故事，然后这个世界要有现代中国的为背景。哎，现在出现了一个关于修仙学院的故事，我觉得这个题材很符合我的想法。现在中国的这个 AI app 应该生成的东西非常快，瞬间就好。看现在已经基本差不多了。
Sun Jianwei is an animation director based in Beijing. But these days, he prefers to include the word AI or artificial intelligence in front of his title. And that's because the tools he used have completely rewritten the rules of his craft.
我的工作室过去的员工是60-70人，因为 AI， 我的员工现在只有4个人了。因为4个人完全能驾驭得了过去60-70人的工作量，而且效率要比60-70人要更高。
Jianwei is among the 30-odd% of the Chinese population who use generative AI regularly. That works out to over 500 million people.
甚至我要获取很多信息，过去说我们百度一下，我谷歌一下，现在不用了，我一个 DeepSeek 全解决了。
We're living through one of the biggest tech revolutions in history. From AI to robotics, drones, technology is reshaping everything we do. But as we usher in the future, there's an important piece we may overlook: electricity.
For example, per ChatGPT search with 0.3 watt-hour. Will you light up an LED bulb for a few minutes, or maybe running our computer for a few minutes? That's 0.3 watt-hour. That may seem small, but if you multiply that by billions of queries around the world, and that is where we will see a huge energy demand surge.
The more advanced our tech becomes, the hungrier it gets for electricity. For example, just looking at data centers alone, their draw on electricity is expected to double by 2030. So, how is electricity generated? Traditionally, this happens in power stations. Here, fuel is burnt to create heat. That heat turns water into steam. The steam spins turbines. And as those turbines whirl, magnets rotate inside coils of wire, generating electricity through electromagnetic induction.
The major kind of next generation of emergent industries that we're looking at, of course, it's AI. That's the major one. All of the data centers, all of the computing power that is needed to make that transition happen needs a lot of electricity, so much energy.
And why does any of this matter? Because as countries battle for leadership in the technologies that will define the next century, electricity, stable, abundant electricity, is the foundation of that race.
We do need to find the next wave of innovation in which this will carry the economy forward, and improving productivity and also addressing the issue of rising labor costs. Then robotics, AI could actually help us maintain cost competitiveness. This is what countries need to drive the next wave of industrial development, the next wave of innovation. And it has also made our life more comfortable.
Therefore, energy potentially becomes the bottleneck when it comes to how quickly you can ramp up that industry.
Widespread adoption of AI could increase worker productivity anywhere from 13 to 40%, according to various reports. A step that Jianwei has already adopted in his animation studio.
很早之前我们是完全有手绘的，想了半天，想了10天半个月，可能出来一个结果我们还不满意。现在有了 AI 呢，我们只需要几个字，把我们想要的一个人物给它描述给它，它生成的结果基本上80%可以达到我们的满意程度。
Right now, the United States and China are competing for dominance in future tech industries. The US leads in cloud computing and AI chips. China controls the electric vehicle market and has surged ahead in factory automation. But when it comes to electrification, it appears China is the clear front-runner. From producing just 1/3 the electricity of the US in 2000, by 2024, China was generating twice as much as the US. And what's more impressive is how the transformation is taking place. While the initial spurt was driven by fossil fuels, this is changing.
In the last year, coal was still about 55% of the generation mix. In 2025, it will drop a little bit again. It will probably be down to about 53% of the power generation mix, which is still a lot. And then you talk about your clean energy source, wind, solar, right, hydropower. The total is about 32, 33% last year. That should inch up a little bit this year.
China's clean energy share is rising fast, faster than any other major economy. One of the companies powering this clean energy surge is Envision, the world's largest wind turbine producer.
Envision is leading for smart wind turbine, and we are the leading position from worldwide, and we are number 2 for delivery. Last year, about 14 gigawatt of wind turbine to the market. And also, we get the order taken from globally number 1 last 3 years.
In 2024, wind power accounted for 10% of China's total electricity generation. Solar power was 9%. And the country produces the majority of solar panels and wind power equipment globally.
We developed smart wind turbine with the AI together. So we have 2 big models. The first is the AI weather forecast model, and second is the energy model together, so that we can understand when power will come and how to consume such a new energy with high value.
Across the country, new low-carbon sources are meeting much of China's growing electricity demand.
The goal is to try to make sure as much of that as possible is met by generation from low-carbon sources like wind, water, solar, and nuclear. And that has been happening increasingly. In 2024, around 85% of all of the new electricity consumption was met by low-carbon sources.
对我们对气候变化的承诺呢，就起了一个很大的保障作用。所以整种方面，从经济、生活以及我们的安全，以及我们在对这个环境和气候变化方面呢，都是至关重要的。
But creating power is only part of the story. Electricity has to travel, sometimes across thousands of kilometers, from where it's generated to the people and machines that need it. Electricity starts at the power station, then shoots through high-voltage transmission lines that crisscross the country. Near cities, the voltage is lowered in substations so it's safe for everyday use, all monitored by control centers. This whole chain is collectively known as the electricity grid. The balance between supply and demand of electricity to absorb sudden changes without crashing is what experts call grid resilience.
Renewable energies are intermittent, right? I mean, they depend on the weather conditions at that hour. So if you have a lot of solar radiation, a lot of sun, then you produce a lot of solar energy. And if, let's say, the wind is blowing hard, you also have a lot of wind. So with resilience in that grid, that means that no matter how much energy is being generated at any point across the grid will be able to take it and distribute that energy efficiently without causing any blackouts or problems or power failures.
And in a world run by cloud computing, drones, and AI-powered robots, a stable electricity grid is paramount.
Say, for example, a research student trying to run a simulation. Just in the middle of it, there's a power outage. Well, whatever you have been doing in the past few weeks, maybe months, all the work will be lost. So as much as countries want to exponentially develop the technology, they would also have to develop the energy systems. So that means modernizing your power grid, making sure your energy sources are reliable.
Here, China has invested heavily in electrical infrastructure. In 2022, some 500 billion yuan, around $78 billion was spent on grid build-out. In 2025, investment could reach $91 billion. By comparison, the US invested about $30 billion in 2024.
When you're looking at an emergent industry that needs a lot of electricity, can we absorb it right now with our current capacity? Or do we have the ability to quickly ramp up even more to meet the growing need? In China's case, the answer is unequivocally yes. And the United States right now is really straining to figure out how are we going to meet the energy needs of what we anticipate will be this massive, massive AI boom.
So, how did a once energy insecure China achieve this? Welcome to Shenzhen, China's hardware capital, where the future doesn't just get imagined, it gets demoed. At the China International High-Tech Achievements Fair, more than 500 exhibitors from over 100 countries have gathered to showcase breakthroughs in AI, clean energy, and robotics. One such company is Robotics, which is building intelligent mobility agents.
那么我们现在的自重是50公斤，但是我们可以达到50公斤的动态负载，然后可以达到150公斤的这个静态负载，这个其实是一个比较大的一个比值。然后我们在这个上面有非常丰富的一些应用，比如说像我们的一些这个物流的一些配送，包括一些专业器材的一些载荷，我们其实可以做到一个非常高的一个应用。然后我们在这个消防领域，针对这个消防灭火的场景，我们做了一个可以达到400公斤的一个特别版。那么这个也是目前在全球具身智能体里面载荷最大的。
Robotics and the other Chinese innovations being paraded at the fair are examples of China's push towards what the government calls new productive forces.
New productive forces is, at its heart, a political slogan. So in the past, we were looking at heavy industry being very dominant. We're looking at coal and steel and traditional heavy industry segments. The new quality productive forces slogan signals an idea that we want to be having a more high-tech driven economy, or you could say just more simply, the type of industrial segments that rich and developed countries already have expertise in and have capabilities in. Those are the ones that we want here.
New productive forces were first introduced by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2023. It was emphasized again in 2024 during the country's Two Sessions meeting as being a strategic driver of China's economic future. To realize this vision, China needs electricity.
比如说，现在我们讲的机器人，那么它的驱动完全是靠电力来驱动的，要么电池，你要么就是我们的常用电来驱动的，就是机械手臂啊，我们也看到这些生产上的机械手臂完全是靠电的。现在这种自动化的技术、AI 的技术还有机器人的技术已经这么多推广，如果我们电力不够的话，你可以设想一下，我们的工业生产和我们的生活 会受到很大的影响。
Guiding China's development for the year 2026 to 2030 will be its 15th five-year plan. These plans are medium-term national development blueprints that set the Communist Party's priorities for the economy, society, environment, energy, and security over five-year periods. Recommendations for the 15th five-year plan include promoting the safe, reliable, and orderly replacement of fossil fuels and developing high-quality clean energy. However, China wasn't always energy secure. In 2011, the country experienced a power supply crunch, with more than a dozen provinces experiencing rolling blackouts.
就是前面几年呢，因为我们中国经济改革又进入 WTO， 这个发展非常迅速，但是当时也对环境造成了很大的影响，对这个能源效率呢，大家也没有认真去考虑。
Back then, 80% of electricity in China came from coal-fired power stations. As China's factories operated at full capacity, coal prices surged. With expensive coal, power stations reduced electricity output. This, coupled with the hot summer that hit China's hydropower production, caused rolling outages. The 2011 power shortage prompted change, including a surge in constructing ultra-high voltage transmission lines.
这个电力的互相互济，各个省之间互济通道也不完善，盖了很多煤电厂，也盖了很多，但是输送不出来，所以那个时候特高压呢就开始了，就要输送。现在你看，你们到西北去，你看那特高压一条一条往滚，往这个东部输送，往南部输送。
Before 2010, China's energy policy was fragmented, split across various departments and ministries. So, the National Energy Commission was established in January of that year to coordinate and set out the national strategy. It is China's highest level decision-making body on energy. Between 2011 to 2015, Beijing set binding national energy targets and decided where large projects should be built.
你原来以前还是缺电，现在基本上是不缺电，就是因为你有这规划。我这个制造厂商，我知道我应该生产多少，更重要的就是我投资者，你说你要鼓励可再生能源，那我就大力的，因为你要这个得到国家的这个保证嘛。但是不管怎么样，就是每一个不管各个企业，可再生也好，节能也好，或者是煤电也好，都把这个5年计划指引在这里面有投资也有这个各个方面规划，各个省的规划这些电网的规划都统一做起来。
In the 14th five-year plan, there's a target to raise renewables' share of electricity consumption from around 29% in 2020 to 33% in 2025.
But for a place like China, coal-fired power is really cheap. And if you give a data center operator their option to use the cheapest, most stable electricity they can get, they might be inclined to select coal-fired power. Instead, building a new data center in many places throughout the country, they are mandated to use at least 80% renewable electricity for their power source.
These plans didn't just change policy. They altered China's entire electricity landscape. In 2025, China was the top investor in clean energy, accounting for almost 30% of total global investment. This was followed by the US at nearly 20%. In 2023, it added nearly 220 gigawatts of solar capacity, more than the entire US solar fleet. China also controls over 80% of global solar manufacturing and produces 97% of the world's silicon wafers, the essential ingredient in solar panels. With the growth in renewables, China plans to hit peak carbon emissions by 2030.
That's the goal, and to meet that goal, while not sacrificing growth, you have to be able to build massive scales of clean energy. Otherwise, you are just sacrificing your ability to grow, right? So that's the role that the renewables are able to play. They're allowing you to continue to use more electricity without asking for more from the already overdrawn carbon budget.
Apart from generation and transmission, there is another piece of the electricity puzzle that China has an advantage: storage. While fossil fuel-based electricity can be generated on demand, renewables are intermittent. When the sun shines, solar panels produce electricity, regardless of demand. This means that the excess electricity generated must be stored for future use. China controls more than 3/4 of global lithium-ion battery production. Part of its dominance is due to the country earmarking batteries as a priority sector since the 2000s. Tyson Electronics is one of the first companies to commercialize power banks. The company has now expanded from consumer electronics to bigger things.
随着现在电动汽车逐步的成为家庭和个人最大的智能设备以后，我们从2020年就新增了有关为智能汽车充电的这种充电桩和储能的相关的业务，作为公司新的一个重点的拓展项目。
Powered by the sun, these charging stations are part of a microgrid that Tyson is developing. Microgrids are self-contained systems that can generate, transmit, and store electricity independently of the main grid.
好比是一个城市的自来水管网，那就是传统的电网，它可以通过管道把水送到每家每户。这个微电网相当于就是自己家如果好比有一个水箱，我自己也有管道，这个公司没有水的时候，我自己也可以有水供应。但在某种极端的情况下，你比如我在沙漠里面要干一个工程，要建桥，需要用到电动工具这些或者各种设备，甚至这个员工宿舍的用电，你要让电网专门给你拿根线过来，那不可想象的。
Since the 2011 energy crunch, China's industrial policy has dramatically expanded its electricity infrastructure as well as dominating critical sectors like renewables and storage. This gives it a decisive advantage in the future tech race.
那么随着整个机器人的普及应用，从前期的整个训练到后期的推理，我觉得对这个算力的消耗会几何倍数的往上增长。那么这种增长势必对我们电力的这种运行的效率，对电力的整个容量能力，我们要进行新的一个考验。
With China pushing ahead, with what will power future tech, is the US falling behind? In the US, the data center boom is seeing such facilities mushroom in many places. Even here, in rural Virginia, where Ariana Govoni-Young lives.
When they broke ground on these data centers, the first thing they did was knock down all these beautiful old trees. Once they knocked all the trees down, they started blasting and digging to make room for putting the data center. And now there's lights everywhere and there's cameras, and it's one of those things where it's not that little piece of paradise that I bought into.
Data centers are the backbone of the digital world. They store, process, and manage vast amounts of information, essential for AI and cloud computing. And Northern Virginia arguably has the highest concentration of data centers anywhere in the world. It's also home to 35% of all hyperscale data centers. However, each of them requires electricity, a staggering amount of it.
When you look at the electric demands of data centers, on the low end, they usually need maybe 100 megawatts. That's the size of a small city. Hyperscale, which is the massive, many data centers in one projects that are being planned and developed here in Virginia. So we talk about gigawatts. This is getting into the territory of a New York City in terms of these facilities.
In the last few years, demand and supply of electricity in the US have largely kept on par, both growing at around 1 to 2% each year. But this could soon change, with demand outstripping supply. One study predicts that America's electricity consumption could rise by 25% over the next 5 years. By 2050, that could balloon to 78%, driven by technological demands.
What we have now is unprecedented growth in electricity demand, which in some counties of this country is actually in double digits per year in percentages, which we have not seen since 50s and 60s. So essentially the country and the electric power sector were captured by surprise in how much electricity we actually need.
So we're going to need new, huge, high voltage transmission lines, lots of substations, distribution lines. In places where these data centers service, there's a massive need for new infrastructure.
Here, America's energy infrastructure could face challenges in meeting the ramp-up in demand. More than 70% of transmission lines across the country are over 25 years old, putting some beyond design lifespans. So while China has modernized its grid, America's network is showing its age.
The American power grid, it's more than a century old. So somewhere in the early 90s, we hit a level when we learned how to do things using electricity quite efficiently. And without a growth of electricity consumption, we simply did not need to have more capacity added to the grid. And that's why attention of the industry shifted to finding a way to produce the same amount of electricity more efficiently, rather than to think how to produce more electricity.
China has built around 45,000 to 55,000 kilometers of ultra-high voltage lines, which can move more than 1,000 kilovolts of electricity. The bulk of America's power lines have much lower carrying capacities, around 230 to 500 kilovolts. According to a May 2025 assessment by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, the US power grid is approaching critical limits. The report warns that inadequate capacity and transmission bottlenecks could trigger supply shortages during peak periods.
Think of it as highways. Think of reliability as where you can travel smoothly on a highway without bumps, sudden breaks and stops. And think of grid efficiency as everybody is able to travel at high speed without blockages, without traffic jams. So the same analogy applies to power grid. So if the highway is, let's say, a two-lane highway that's designed to accommodate only 100 cars a day, we have no problems. But now that number has been doubled, tripled, maybe 10 times, 100 times more, there will be traffic jams.
So now, American utility firms are in a rush to play catch-up. They've increased their spending by $5 billion to upgrade transmission and $16 billion on distribution systems, all in the last 5 years.
Right now, what we need to do, we need to learn how to build this capacity very quickly. Because once again, we need this energy to remain competitive economically and to make sure this technology can help improve and protect our lives.
To meet the demand, the US is taking a different route from China. While China is scaling up renewables, America is turning to fossil fuels. With the shale gas revolution, the US is now the world's top producer of natural gas, making America energy independent.
Right now, US is blessed with sufficient amount of fossil fuel. But going for a longer term, then there becomes a question mark, right? How do you really secure affordable fossil fuel in the next 10, 20, 30 years?
For now, securing fuel means opening more federal land for oil and gas exploration, which the Trump administration has done. The government has also sped up approvals for drilling permits. And in September 2025, the US Department of Energy announced a $625 million investment to extend the lifespan of aging coal and gas-fired power plants.
特朗普认为，美国现在是能源强国，世界上唯一的一个能源强国。那么它的强国是建立在化石能源基础上的，所以特朗普政府呢，就是根据这个政治实力的左右还有他对化石能源的偏好所以他要维持这个能源强国呢，他要进一步来加强这化石能源。
It's really about the speed and the scale. You build one gas generators and you instantly get hundreds of megawatts of power which are ready to go. When you talk about solar power plants, that would require a lot of land and it takes time to integrate it.
Consequently, momentum for renewables has slowed. President Trump, with his adversarial position on climate change and renewables, has cancelled offshore wind leases and reversed incentives for solar developers.
This whole climate change debate is not just about US and US as a country alone. It is how the world sees US as a leadership in climate change mitigation. And now with the Trump administration, all that are gone.
So all of these countries are working so hard on the carbon footprint, which is nonsense, by the way.
Due to the changes in the federal policy, manufacturers need to adjust to make sure that they are capable of producing generation technologies which are being favored right now. If all of a sudden our country decides that we're back on track with solar and wind and we want to build these technologies, it's going to take industry some time to bring the talent to work on this technology. If we pivot to fossil fuels right now, we will address short-term need in electricity, but we will risk locking in the country into fossil-fired generations for decades to come, and that's going to create problems down the road.
In Virginia, the return to fossil fuels to feed the power-hungry data centers has an impact on the local community. Brennan Gilmore leads a group advocating for clean energy in the state.
Virginia was on the path towards a fossil-free future. In 2000, the legislature passed a landmark act called the Virginia Clean Economy Act that set out the staged closing of gas plants and coal plants throughout Virginia in response to data center demand. Dominion Energy, our largest utility monopoly in Virginia, has essentially broken that pledge to not build out gas and instead put forward new planning documents that said they're going to build 6 new natural gas plants. We shouldn't be relying on fossil fuel plants. We have an existential threat with climate change, and even apart from climate change, these fossil fuel plants are an extraordinarily expensive way to produce electricity, and they have local pollution impacts.
In any case, it will take years for these new plants to come online, leaving locals to compete with the technology giants for the limited supply of electricity.
So last summer, Gainesville started having blackouts. And at first I thought maybe it's because of how hot it is, but because it continued happening, and then talking to people who live near data centers, they're saying, no, this is normal. This happens because there's not enough power to take care of everything.
So, the US and China are locked in a fierce battle for tech supremacy and are adopting different strategies for electrification. How will this shape the tech race? China may be known as the world's factory, but walk into this one and you might be surprised by how quiet it is. That's because the workers aren't people. They're robots, and there are a lot of them. At Gree's smart factory in Zhuhai, robotic arms glide in perfect coordination, assembling air conditioners from start to finish. A new unit rolls off the line every 15 seconds.
金湾工厂的整个自动化的程度达到了85%以上， 主要是包括像我们的钣金加工、注塑加工，基本上全部实现了自动化和无人化。传统的自动化就是靠机械定位和这个盲打的方式去实现的。现在随着 AI 技术的发展，由于视觉算法技术和人工智能方向的发展，所以说我们的工业机器人和视觉 AI 技术相结合，所以就实现了，基本上就实现了所有工序的这个自动的装配、自动的紧固、自动的焊接、自动码垛、自动拆垛，所以基本上大部分的工序都可以实现自动化了。
China has more robots working in factories than the rest of the world combined. In 2024, factories in China installed nearly 300,000 new robots. The rest of the world, around 250,000. Manufacturing in China is predicted to grow 10% annually till 2028, and with it, its electricity needs. In the next 5 years, China's electricity demand is set to grow annually by 4 to 5%. This translates to roughly 2,500 terawatt hours, about the same amount the entire European Union uses in a year.
金湾格力的，因为自动化水平比较高，机器人布置比较多，所以说这个整个的运营需要一年的这个电力需求是5000万千瓦时以上。如果是整个工厂这个断电的话，会造成整个工厂的损失，这个每小时100万以上。
And so, to supplement its renewable energy push, China has invested billions in another energy source: nuclear.
China's got fairly aggressive nuclear plans in the global context to build nuclear. That the scale, they're looking at something like 10 gigawatts a year, roughly, every year for the next foreseeable future. Now, that's still relatively small in the context of China's massive electricity industry, but it's larger than the ambitions of any other country in the world right now.
Nuclear reactors generate electricity through a process called nuclear fission. Atoms of radioactive fissile elements like uranium are split to release heat, which boils water into steam that drives turbines connected to generators. China currently has 28 nuclear reactors under construction, nearly half of the global total. The US is also investing in nuclear technology, committing $80 billion to new nuclear plants. However, progress is slow compared to China.
In the past 15 years, we only built 2 such nuclear reactors. So this difference between the number of data centers that are being built and the number of nuclear reactors that we built in the United States should give you an idea what is an energy gap we are facing.
By 2030, China is expected to overtake the US as the world's largest producer of nuclear energy. Even more striking, China is almost self-sufficient in this field.
There was a very strong push throughout the entire industry, backed by the government, implemented by the major SOEs and supported by the entire supply chain to indigenize all the different aspects, all the different equipment, all the different technology that go into a nuclear power plant. If we can't make it domestically yet, we need to put a specific research project associated with learning how to do it and developing it so we can push it forward domestically.
Nuclear power has an important role in the renewable energy chain. Nuclear reactors do not emit carbon, and their power output can be ramped up or down as needed. Thus, it serves as a reliable supplement for times when renewable power is intermittent. For example, when there's no sun or wind.
Nuclear, having even just a bit of nuclear in the mix helps stabilize everything else. So even if it's only 15% of the generation, that 15% eventually allowed the whole rest of the grid to be more stable while still reaching that zero carbon or low carbon energy mix that you're hoping for.
From January to October this year, China filed over 670 nuclear-related patents, compared to about 320 for the US, which illustrates one more area which gives China the advantage in the electrification race. Heavy investment in research, all at a time when the Trump administration is cutting R&D funding. For example, proposing a 57% cut to the National Science Foundation's budget, which will target clean energy and climate change research.
All of China's top science and technology engineering schools, STEM schools, have massive programs focused on the energy transition, focused on the engineering that is necessary to make this energy transition work. The research and development space inside China is driven by both the universities and the research institutes of all of these major, well-funded, usually state-owned enterprises.
因为现在就是说，我们对这个可再生的研究呢，还没有致敬啊，我们还有很多的这个环节和技术呢，我们也还没有掌握。这个远洋的风电可以再发展，那么像这个太阳能、这个电池、热水器这也是可以再进一步的发展，所以它可以把这个价格呢压得更低，效率提得更高，这个成本更低。
But even with the massive push for nuclear and renewables, China is still a net energy importer. Here is its weakness vis-à-vis the US.
I think from a perspective of energy security, China is still importing a lot of oil. China is also trying to import gas. China is ramping up nuclear really fast, but compared to the amount of coal installed capacity, nuclear capacity is really just a fraction of it. Same as renewable. And so China will continue to have these energy security issues the country needs to address.
In the end, what does all this mean for the global tech war? While headlines often discuss who invents the best chip, trains the most complex AI model, or makes the smartest robots, none of that matters unless you can power them.
算力和存力最终还是由电力所决定的。所以说，电力是决定一个国家的智能制造和 AI 发展的一个瓶颈的一个关键因素。
Talk about Industry 4.0, in which anything and everything is connected, all the way from the factory shop floors to our vehicles. This is where we can no longer afford in any circumstances a power failure. Because imagine a fleet of cars is traveling at high speed on the highway, and these cars are self-drive vehicles. If you have a power failure somehow at one of the data centers, and that is monitoring those vehicles, you're going to have a catastrophic accident on the highway. So this is where the tolerance to power failure will go down to zero, almost zero.
Of course, in the real world, there are many other determinants of technology races. We talk about human capital and funding, and in the case of AI, the availability of chips. But if the only determinant were the availability and cost of energy, China will be winning that race.
There is a lot of talk about America not being able to produce enough electricity to maintain its economic competitiveness in the world of AI. I think that such risk exists on a very short time scale, but in the long term, I fundamentally believe that America is capable of addressing those issues. We have so much creativity and technical talent in the country that can be put to solving these issues, which coupled with our enormously vibrant private sector can deliver on what we need.